Let's bring up our next three panelists here. Forrest French is president at AIA Richmond. He's going to talk about man's effect on nature. Come on up. Come on, let's give him a welcome. Let's welcome these folks to the stage. Thank you. Robyn Eason is the team lead urban planning at the Green Building Certification Institute. Welcome to the stage. And finally, Scott Fisher, professor and founding chair, the Interactive Media Design, USC School of Cinematic Arts. Okay, we're going to begin with Forrest.
Yeah, I don't need it.
Oh, you don't need it? Okay.
I'm going to try to give you a little bit of a background and a vision of, I need to have my notes on the slide. Sorry. Can you click through?
There you go.
Thank you. I'm going to give you the big picture of what the urban environment might be like in the future. I'm going to start with the beginning of the planet and take you to 2050. And it might get a little wacky near the end, but just try to roll with it. I'd like to start with a joke. Promise it has relevance. Why do scuba divers fall backward off the boat? Because if they fell forward, they'd be in the boat. Seems obvious. Here are some other things that, about our planet that might seem obvious but aren't necessarily. All the water that'll ever be here is here now. We're in a closed system, floating in space. The dinosaurs used this water. We use this water now to flush our toilets. Looking at the surface, it might seem like this little ball floating in space is full of water, but it isn't. It's mainly on the surface. This is what it looks like when you take all the water that we have and compare it to the volume of the planet. We harvest energy, mainly fossil fuel. Where does it all go? The largest percentage goes into the systems in our buildings, in our houses. Almost half of all the energy we use annually goes into heating, lighting, and cooling. That's 40% of the annual energy, almost half of what we produce. 40 quadrillion BTUs. That lets us know that we are going to have to reduce our environmental impact on our buildings. Some people believe we're leaving the current epoch, which is called the Holocene, and entering the Anthropocene, the human epoch, when man has a profound effect on the planet. That may or may not be. We in the architectural community do know that population growth and the need to conserve resources will drive dramatic changes. When I was in school studying at the University of Florida, it was predicted that by now, New York and DC would be connected by suburbs. Luckily, that didn't happen. It would have been a disaster. The trend is now in the opposite direction. Today, 50% of all the world's population are in the urban environment. By 2050, it's predicted that 80% will be in the cities. Currently, our cities are very much opposite the natural environment. They're like machines. It's very much city versus nature, and it's an unsustainable model. We're going to have to bring them together, blend them, and have them complement one another. Our cities and buildings will have to develop systems based on energy conservation and renewable resources. Right now, cities are paved, impervious landscapes. Future cities are going to need to be porous, like the forest floor, limiting the disruption in the natural watershed. All surfaces and materials in the city absorb heat all day and radiate heat at night. And this is called the heat island effect. After sunset, air temperatures in cities can be as high as 20 degrees more than less developed neighboring areas. Our most pervasive transportation modes are going to have to change too. We all know that it's extremely inefficient to use 2,000 to 3,000 pound vehicle to transport a 150 pound person. That's where we are now. Cars are a big issue for architects and building owners too. It takes an enormous amount of space to house them, and we have to figure out where they're going to go before we can build a building. Some buildings are built with 4 stories or 10 stories of parking garage to meet local building codes. You have to go 10 stories before you get to a habitable space. Our challenge is in figuring out how to maintain our current level of freedom of mobility using much less energy, or alternative non-carbon-based energy, and much less space. Getting back to the science of buildings, imitating nature to solve human problems, or biomimicry, has become popular. Da Vinci used biomimicry to develop designs for human flight. This is his ornithopter. We're starting to use biomimicry in architecture. Grimshaw architects in England designed a building skin after the shell of fog-basking beetles, harvesting water from the air in a desalination plant to transfer salt water to fresh water. Their process has used a fraction of the energy of a typical desalination plant. Our cities will need to blend with the local ecology. We need to design them more like forests, and our buildings more like trees, absorbing the rain and the sun for their sustenance. It's referred to as ecomimicry. Building considered to be one of the most efficient office buildings in the country is in Seattle. It was just completed. It collects sun water with a rooftop photovoltaic, like a tree canopy. It collects rainwater to clean and nourish its occupants. Uses waterless urinals and toilets for 100% on-site treatment. And it uses a geothermal heating system. Michael Pollan, a famous eco-architect, said we need to focus on a radical increase in resource efficiency. That, more than anything, is going to shape our cities in the future. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Robyn, Eason. I'm with the U.S. Green Building Council, and I'm going to kind of pick up where Forrest left off and talk about impressions of the city from the past, tools to help shape the present, and emerging trends of the future. Get started. So as a Generation Wire, my impressions of the city really stem from primetime TV, so shows like Dallas and 227, The Cosby Show, MTV videos, LA Law, sort of romanticized city life, and presented sort of exciting, dramatic images of the city that I knew at a sort of that early age that I wanted to be, I wanted that to be a part of my adulthood, whether as a working professional or bringing up a family. But the founders of USGBC were born generations before me, and so they had a head start in kind of noticing what the development patterns of the last 50 years of the 20th century were starting to do to the environment. And it really struck a chord with them to try to figure out what to do about that, how to curb and reverse that trend of urban sprawl, land degradation, greenfield development, and a lot of things that were predicated by the accessibility of the automobile. And so one of the things that they came up with, obviously, was to create a sort of mission-based nonprofit organization that was keen on changing the marketplace to recognize the triple bottom line, that being environment, economy, society, or people, places, and profit. And so one of the ways that they wanted to go about this was through what they call market transformation. So really evaluating where the built environment industry was in terms of being required to do sort of standard building codes and design according to those, and figure out a way to start to push them into thinking more environmentally friendly. And so our take on that was not to set a bar so high that people couldn't reach, but to try to push a cohort of that standard market to be green building leaders. And so one of the ways we thought to do that was through creating a sustainability tool called LEAD, which is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And it really addresses the greening of schools, commercial buildings, interior spaces, communities, and existing buildings. It's really a way to kind of help project teams find the right green building decisions in sort of an integrated process. And so for the commercial side, there are 4 set of sustainability criteria noted in these 5 themes here. Sustainable sites really deals with the site design and has about 4 of 16 credits that deal with location-based decisions, which I'll get back to in a second. But the conversations didn't stop at buildings. They wanted to broaden the scale a bit and think about how we could infuse sustainability in our built environment from a broader scale. And so LEAD for Neighborhood Development, otherwise known as LEAD-ND, was birthed from that idea. And it was really sort of a set of criteria to help not only municipalities, but developers and citizenry really think about the elements of compact, walkable communities. So instead of 5 credit categories, LEAD-ND boasts 3 credit categories, stemming with smart site selection, low impact green building design, and neighborhood pattern and design. And in addition to it being a rating system, we wanted to make sure it was a sustainability tool where those users, municipalities, developers, citizenry, can really recognize the benefit of this type of design and notice that it has implications on greenhouse gas emission reduction, quality of life increase, shared public infrastructure, so on and so forth. And so now we've just released LEAD version 4, which is the next version of LEAD, about a year ago, and we're pushing the market even further to see what it can do, really. And the most relevant piece for this audience is the addition of the location and transportation credit categories. So instead of just 5 credit categories, we now have 7 major credit categories, which the top there, the icon with the bus, is representative of our location and transportation credit category. So before we had sustainable sites, which just had the 4 location-based credits. Well, the LT category actually is now a credit category just about location-based decision-making. And as Forrest mentioned and some of the other earlier presenters mentioned, cities are just going to get more populated over the next 50 years. And so we, being the creators of a sustainability tool, wanted to make sure that we were part of instructing the market on what was important when they're thinking about the built environment. And so the location and transportation credit category really focuses on those location-based decisions now in a way that earlier versions of LEAD weren't able to do. So in terms of emerging trends for the future, I see sort of 3 things. An increase in walkable communities that really celebrate the pedestrian experience in a way that doesn't eliminate the need for a car, although in some instances it may. But it really dictates the evolution of the car and its role in our culture and in our land design decisions. The second thing I see is an increase in shared infrastructure. So it's obvious that people this day and age want different options to move around cities that don't necessarily involve single occupancy vehicles. So more investment in public transit, more investment in bicycle infrastructure, and more investment in quick transport options like Uber, Lyft, Car2Go, and so on. And the last thing I see is the evolution of smart, sustainable cities, which is really using a lot of the technologies we heard about today to allow for real-time performance and operational monitoring of a city and its infrastructure and its transportation networks. So I'd be remiss if I would say that USGBC was the only partner in this space. We have a lot of different organizations that we partner with or that are our sister organizations that really want to inform the market of the interplay between humans, machines, and the built environment. Thank you.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Scott Fisher from School of Cinematic Arts at USC. I'm Dean of Research there and run a lab called the Mobile and Environmental Media Lab. So what's cinema got to do with all this? Cinema's been a really common topic for the popular cinema ever since its beginning. Here's a scene from Metropolis in 1937. But most of the films that we see have been, with future cities, have been just dramatically dystopic. I mean, I don't think I'd want to live in any of those cities depicted in these films. So today, I really want to talk not so much about traditional cinema, but some of the new developments that are happening to make participation in our future cities a little bit more participatory, a little bit more playable, and a little bit more cinematic. So the first development is really that architects have a wide range of materials available now that are programmable, unlike the kind of steel and glass and brick and mortar that they've usually been using. One of my favorite examples is Toyo Ito's Tower of Winds, built in Yokohama in 1986. So all these lights and neon rings and spotlights at the base are programmable. They respond in real time to the speed of wind around the building and the sound of the urban landscape below. Here's a more recent example by architects Rob Lowe and Joshua Stein. So this is built out of shape memory alloy. It's actually it's memory metal, so it responds to heat and temperature, and is also human proximity. A second development coming up is really the emergence of the virtual. So the virtual is really leaking out into our physical everyday surroundings. So what this means is that this layer of information we've been hearing about today is becoming a new part of the city infrastructure. So one example would be projection mapping that we're seeing now around urban spaces. So being able to really reskin the surfaces around us in real time and very personally. This is the Tokyo City Symphony project. Here's a little bit more, another dystopic example by architect and designer Keiichi Matsuda in a design fiction he did to show what a city of the future might look with this kind of taken to its commercial extreme. The game industry has probably taken this farther than anybody. This is Google's game called Ingress. It's a multiplayer, location-based, geolocation-based game where players interact with virtual portals embedded in public landmarks in every major city around the world. The third major change that I wanted to mention is really our conception of what the infrastructure of the city is. It's really an outgrowth of these new programmable materials, the emergence of the virtual, and it's really about now infrastructure, including the internet and this information technology. We've got sensor systems, surveillance systems, literally everywhere now in urban environments. Internet of Things is projected to be more than 50 billion devices by 2020. And those things mostly will be coming from the urban environment. Here's a project we've done in our lab called the Million-Story Building, where the building itself has 4,000 sensors that we harvest through a mobile device. The building has a Twitter account. It tweets about what's happening inside the building and about what's happening with these sensors. Here's a 3D interactive model of LA. Well, actually, it's not. It's a setting for a video game called Grand Theft Auto. But every major city has or will have soon interactive models like this of its surroundings. This is what David Galanter called in 1991 mirror worlds. So if we take all these data streams that Peter talked about this morning and others have talked about, we feed that into these 3D interactive environments, we have something that can change in real time and show us really what's going on in the city. And I would propose that these mirror worlds will become our major interface to the cities and to most of the things that we do. Here's a kind of conceptual sketch of what that might look like. So here's a real-time current example of a mirror world, another urban game called We Are Data by Ubisoft's London studio. So you can choose 3 cities, London, Berlin, or Paris. And if you click on any of these spots, you can actually see real-time tweets, you can see trains moving, you can see traffic light status, things like that. Another important sensor network in the city, of course, is the automobile. That's why we're all here. You know, currently cars have hundreds of sensors. They're generating lots of data in real time. The self-driving cars, like Google's car, generates up to 21 terabits in an 8-hour day of driving. Another project from my lab we've been doing with BMW for the last 3-4 years, where we harvest this sensor data, look at driver behavior, and then we author entertainment experiences that are fed back through the car to the driver. These kind of mirror worlds will be an interface for driving experiences as well. I mean, the mirror world essentially is kind of a car navigation system on steroids, but it can also be this kind of immersive video game experience. So again, a new way to interact with our urban surroundings in the future. I don't want to end on a totally negative note, but here's probably the most worst possible evolution of our urban environments. But I guess what I would sum up that, you know, the future cities we're going to see will be participatory, they'll be playable, they'll be eminently hackable. There'll be connected buildings within connected cities populated by connected people, connected objects, et cetera. So it's, for us, really a new form of cinematic experience where you're literally inside this kind of storytelling environment. Okay, thanks.